All right, guys, we're back once again on this Pat 7 podcast interview show, YouTube channel, whatever. We don't have an official name for this quite yet. But today we have a very special couple. It's going to be a couples interview. And we have Noble Brown and Sarabeth. Now, I love your relationship. I love you guys. And one of the reasons I love you guys is not just simply that it's so apparent you have such a loving relationship, such a passionate relationship, and the high level of compatibility, but it's also a very integrated relationship. And we're going to talk all about that stuff. But I think one of the things that's also cool is that a lot of couples, if they do Twitter, it's kind of like it's very business focused with it, and look, there's nothing wrong with it. There's absolutely nothing wrong with it. But what I like about the two of you is it's just so organic. It's just like you both kind of put your own stuff out there. And I don't know, did you guys meet on Twitter, or did you just happen to join?
We did. It was prior to the accounts that we're using now. So, yeah. But we did, and it was just it's happened. It's not the first time or the last time a couple's met, on Twitter, just kind of engaged around similar topics. We realized we were in the same county, which was close enough, and just took it from there, So
tell me more about how this all kind of played out. I mean, because I've one of the things I talk to clients about now is the importance of building up a social media profile, and just because we're at this point where there's such a fragmentation even society with values, and having people who are on the same page with things. It's not that you obviously can't go and meet people in real life, but there's a lot of benefits to interacting in online communities like we have on Twitter, for reasons obviously apparent with the two of you. But I'm really curious, what does the courtship process look like? How did courtship process? How did you, Noble? How did you go about wooing Sarabeth? How did this happen?
The metaphor I use is she was the wounded gazelle on the Serengeti, and that's what I identify.
And how'd you open?
How honest are we going to be? I didn't send a picture of my junk or anything, if that's what the audience is wondering. No, it's just, I think we're big advocates of getting people on Twitter or any social media. I think it's a great way to meet people, because you get to see, kind of who people really are. People are very reactive on Twitter, and so and you get to see, like, okay, how hysterical is this person reacting to this current event or this thing or this issue? What are they really passionate about? What do they just not care about? What's actually important to them? And all that is sort of laid bare. I mean, unless you're completely fake, which does happen.
Yeah.
But the other piece of it was, you can have relationships that are long distance over Twitter. I don't think they work, because then it's very hard to discover if that facade is real or if it's authentic.
Mm-hmm. I do think that the authenticity is important.
Yeah, and you got to discover that pretty early on. So I didn't waste a lot of time in saying we should get together for lunch or coffee or whatever, and making that happen, because I didn't want to invest a lot of time in somebody that wasn't real.
And you asked a lot of questions.
Well, yeah. So
I mean, there was definitely, once he slid into the DMs and we started to have the question, like just the back and forth of, and I don't want to say it's strange questions, but it wasn't like, what do you like to do for fun? It's like,
sure.
I think you asked me, who would I want to have dinner with? Someone who's dead, someone who's alive. It's just some kind of, I don't know.
I used a lot of open-ended kind of probing questions to figure out more about kind of who she was and what she was about. We'd both come out of bad marriages previously. And so, and I had met my last wife online and, you know, but she was long distance and that was a mistake. And the facade was not real. But by the time I discovered it, it was so far into the relationship and you're so vested that you're like, oh, maybe I can make this work. And you know, you can't. But there were a couple things I did. I would try to think of a top 5 list to hit her with every day. Like, what are your top 5, you know, favorite rock bands of all time, or top 5, you know, movies of all time, or whatever, things like that. Like, it makes you think, you know, but then it gives you a chance to share something that you care about. But the other thing that really stuck with me, and it's a piece of advice that I use to this day, is, and I don't know if I picked this up like on a Tim Ferriss podcast or some dumb shit, but it was, what's one piece of advice that you give other people that most other people don't believe in? And she told me, well, I think you should talk to strangers. You know, because we always tell our kids, don't talk to strangers. And that's like, you know, that's good advice for a child. But as an adult, that's terrible advice. Like, you should talk to strangers. And I started testing it while we were in our courtship process. And that was actually how I met my boxing coach, was by talking. So that worked out pretty well. And it's continued to work out well.
And I think because we both came out of bad relationships, we were both very honest about what we wanted.
Right.
Because, you know, kind of going through that after the relationship, trying to find ourselves again and being, okay, I'm not making those mistakes again. And being really clear about expectations in the relationship. What I expect you to do, what do you expect me to do? Am I okay with that? I mean, there were some pretty tough conversations.
Yeah, it sounds like you did a lot of the heavy lifting early on, like a lot of heavier vetting from the outset versus, you know, a lot of sort of standard, I guess you could say, game or courtship stuff. Probably more game, I would say, than courtship stuff. It's very much on like, oh, you know, try to build the attraction up, and then you move into more of the screening for values, etc. But
I think they can run in parallel.
Yeah.
I don't think it's one does not accept the other. So you can totally, you know, run, you know, whatever game you want to run, you know, and guys have different opinions about this. But if you're good at it, it should be a background process. Like, you're not really thinking that hard about it. It's just.
And post 40, I mean, you know, you should know.
Yeah.
We
met after 40, so it wasn't like we had identity crises of our own to sort out. And that's the other mistake I think people make, is that they get into relationships early in life, and it's natural for a person, man or woman, to have kind of an identity shift, you know, throughout their 20s and even 30s. But you should have your stuff figured out by the time you were our age. Not everybody does, but we did. So it wasn't that hard to kind of, okay, this is what I want and this is what I don't want. And if you're not okay with this, that's fine. But, you know, this is so.
And you could go after what you wanted, and because both of you knew what you wanted, there wasn't this sort of skittishness. Because I know that, you know, especially when you're dealing with younger people, that's so much pressure on them a lot of times, and they don't know how to process it. So a lot of times, especially with women, when they're like in their early 20s, they'll like, they might freak out and kind of disappear because they don't know, even if they are attracted by it. It's very mature is what I'm trying to say. Like, and the relationship, but I think what's interesting about this is that it's not talked about, it's not emphasized enough, the importance of maturity with healthy relationships, because you guys met on a mature level, the foundation became really strong and you were able to build out into so much more fun. Like, I think people tend to think like, oh, well, if you talk about that stuff, that means you're just going to be like, it's just too serious, right? Like, why are you focused? But actually, by going about and doing that, not only did you save your guys time, it made it so that you guys could actually enjoy each other a lot more. That's what it seems like, rather than having to like.
We're serious. We're very serious.
Yeah. That's what I picked up, right? I picked up that.
No, I think the important thing is the maturity aspect. Again, these things can run in parallel. You don't have to say, okay, we're going to do this only, or we're going to do that only. You should be well developed enough to say that there's a time and place for it. So, there's plenty of time to handle your business, do your job, be a parent, all that stuff. That's the other thing. Like, we both had kids. We have kids, and so, and we both have pretty big jobs. So, we can compartmentalize all of that stuff. And she's gone as far as to do her whole 7 roles thing to talk about the different ways you can compartmentalize, what you're doing with your life. And, there's a time and a place and a season for everything.
Mm-hmm.
You don't have to be all things all the time, but you can be more than one thing at a time.
Right.
And that's the thing that people miss, is especially young people, and maybe it's a good thing. You'll see lots of online gurus saying, okay, if you're in your 20s, you should just be focusing on stacking skills and stacking bread. And I'm like, that's actually not a bad advice until you figure out how to do better than that. Maybe just stick to that.
Mm-hmm.
But when you get older, like, acquiring a new skill or making money should be automatic for you.
Mm-hmm.
It should not be something that keeps you, like, I can't go on this vacation to Cancun because I've got to make money, or I've got to learn how to code in Python. No, that should be automatic. And I think for most of the men my age that I hang out with, that's not a problem. It's the younger guys that are still trying to figure it out, and there's nothing wrong with that.
So obviously you were attracted to her from the beginning, even if you did want to do some further investigation. But Sarabeth, were you attracted to Noble off the bat, or was it after a series of exchanges that you kind of got pulled in?
I certainly think it was the exchanges and the intelligence, because in my previous relationship, that was kind of a miss, right? Like, I'm a shit tester. Okay, I know that there's women out there that are like, you shouldn't shit test, you shouldn't game, but that is not me. I'm a total brat, and so I wanted someone who could just keep up with me mentally and ahead of me, and so those exchanges were really important. How he reacted to me, how he reacted to me giving him shit. Like, I mean, it was that was 100% the hook. I mean, he does look like the Wolverine. So, I mean, that's.
She wants discipline in her life. That's really what she's trying to say.
Not too much. But yeah, the intelligence. Like, anytime I ask him a question, he knows the answer, or he'll say, "Wait, 1 second, let me check something," and then it's like 30 seconds later.
Mm-hmm.
That's nice. Like, that's just, we can have like 5 conversations simultaneously. We'll just squirrel all over the place. We call it squirreling. But it's just constant engagement, and that's what I like. That's what's cool.
So yeah, so there's a very strong, I mean, I think the chemistry is on multiple levels, but certainly a very strong mental and intellectual kind of chemistry, banter. In past relationships, what, like, especially since you guys were both married before, in your prior marriages and prior relationships, what were like the real issues that you tended to find, and what did you learn from those relationships that helped you in this one?
I think for myself, the issue was the understanding, or the lack of understanding that I could and should be completely authentic, and not yield to to just all manner of bad ideas, bad situations, just because I didn't want to hurt someone's feelings. Um, you know, it, I don't want to get into a psychoanalyze my last marriage type session, but the reality is, if I had approached it more clear-headedly, I would have never initiated it. You know, the rule set that I had going into this one would have prevented it 100 different times before I got there. So, and it's simple things, not compromising your mission because somebody else doesn't want to flex, or especially if they don't have a good reason to. So in other words, like, I moved to Northern California to be with her. She didn't have a job.
Yeah.
I had a very good job, a very, very good career here in Phoenix before I moved, and I actually took a step back to be closer to her, and that was a huge mistake. Now, it's like I said, you can compromise, you can flex on these things if the other person has something equally or more important going on, but barring that, there was nothing like that there. So that was a huge flag. There were, obviously the long distance nature of it didn't allow me to see up close, what she was really like before it was, was too far gone. So there's all kinds of things that you need to be able to be authentic about it. I think is the number one piece of advice I can give, is if you find yourself being inauthentic, then you need to stop and reevaluate it, and I think that's the mistake people make, is that they're afraid of hurting feelings, but they're putting themselves at risk.
So it sounds like when you were essentially, you were acting in good faith and trying to, make things, have a successful relationship, take the next necessary kind of sacrifices to make it work. But
right,
in return, there were more demands that got put on you. A lot of, and many of those demands were about even things that you would just do normally as part of your personality, that were like, oh, you can't do this, you shouldn't do this. Like, there's a lot of like guilt tripping kind of stuff, like controlling guilt stuff.
I mean, my ex is a world-class, gaslighter. So, there was certainly plenty of that. I saw through it pretty early on. The problem is I had 2 kids by then.
Yeah.
And so it wasn't difficult to realize that I'd painted myself into a corner. What really, most of the relationship was spent first trying to fix it, and then when that didn't work, it was, okay, where's my exit strategy?
Mm-hmm.
And it took me a while to, and I give guys this advice all the time, like, just come to the conclusion that you're going to get completely zeroed out. You're going to get estranged from your children because she's going to manipulate them. And you're in for a couple of years of just abject pain while you go through the divorce and the custody battle. And that's okay, because you can repair the relationship with your kids and you can make more money. And so your peace of mind, like, what is that worth? And I was at a point in my life where I had made a lot of changes to myself. I'd done a lot of introspective and self-improvement type stuff. And that was, pointing me in all the right directions. And the only thing holding me back at that point was her. And so that had to go. And there was no fixing it. So that's what it did.
Yeah. This is such a, like, I know so many guys who, because I have a lot of clients who are either just out of that or kind of coming to terms with it. Sometimes there's some hope in the relationships. There's problems, but it's not. But you can tell there's a sort of, when the person, you just know they're not going to change. They're at least not with you in the context of the dynamic.
And and maybe they shouldn't, like they should be authentic.
Mm-hmm.
Like I said, I don't want to get into a beat up my ex situation here. What was important to her is still important to her. To her credit, she's remained consistent. She's still living the same way she did 20 years ago.
Mm-hmm.
So nothing there has changed. She's remained consistent and authentic to herself. I didn't realize how incompatible that was for me. And so here we are.
Yeah.
I think I've known lots of guys now that have been able to turn the corner and make it work. And that's because they were with somebody that wanted to make it work. And usually it boiled down to when the man did the work to kind of figure out, okay, I'm on a mission. I'm going to, figure this out. I'm going to improve myself, and I'm going to lead, in a meaningful and reliable fashion. Then the wife will usually say, okay, that's kind of what I wanted all along. Thank you for, steering us out of the rocky shore. But in a lot of cases, it doesn't work out. And when it doesn't work out, the biggest mistake that I see guys make is they get hung up on the stuff.
Yeah. Yeah.
On the money, and they get hung up. Well, I worked my whole life for this. Okay. And, you're going to lose it either way. Either you're giving it to your attorney or you're giving it to her. You decide. But that's been my observation. I've had several close friends that have been through very contentious divorces, and when I saw the outcome and what they had to show for it, for all the fighting they did, I realized, I'm better off just kind of signing it over and getting out, because then you can move on a little faster and reclaim those years of your life.
And all that energy that you would have lost.
Right.
I mean,
and then you're just fighting, and the kids see that, and it's like, now my kids, if they wanted to go through and dig up the files on my divorce and my custody battle, there's nothing in there.
Yeah.
There's no back and forth bickering or, any of this stuff, at least not for my part of it. And there's no, well, why did you leave mom broke or whatever? No, I left with my clothes and my car. That was it. So
it's hard to have a negative picture painted of you down the line.
well, and that was more important to me than fighting over it. So
yeah.
It took a while to get there.
Your story is a very classic one in the manosphere, a very kind of classic red pill story. But one of the things that the manosphere doesn't really shed a lot of light on, and sometimes to the extent of almost pretending it doesn't exist, is that women also go through bad divorces. And women are often married to guys who, whether maybe it's just incompatibility, but women go through, they have some bad marriages as well, and they're justified in feeling that way. So, what about you, Sarabeth? What was your journey to this point?
I did not have a very contentious divorce. So we had been trying for 5 years to fix our relationship, and we moved to Arizona right when it was still bad, and I was realizing, like, I don't think we're gonna make it. But we both wanted to be in Arizona, so it worked. And we have a special needs child, so it's it complicates things a little bit, but we settled everything out of court.
Mm-hmm.
I think that, going back to the authenticity, I tried to be authentic in the end, but in the beginning I wasn't. I tried to just mold to what he wanted, to kind of like following the mission, like, oh, that's your mission. Okay, then I'm here. Like, that's what you want to do. Okay, I'm in. I'm going to be supportive. I think that my nonverbal communication kind of snuck in more than I thought it did. I was a corporate woman. I was like, I'm going to the C-suite. He was going to stay home with the kid. I mean, it was like, that was my dream. Like, I'm climbing the ladder. And then, of course, I hate to say it, the stupid epiphany phase hit me. And I was like, you know what? I don't need to climb the ladder. I can go back to school, become a teacher, be off in the summers, and be at home. And all these things I thought were going to fix our relationship. I thought, that's what I should do, you know, kind of a calling, and I was going to support him, and it never worked. You know, everything's good in theory until it comes to practice. And so we kind of, you know, the end of our relationship was pretty easy. We didn't have a lot of money to split. I was kind of the breadwinner. I pay child support, not a lot of it, not like he does. So there's still a little bit of that, but it was a pretty amicable split.
Mm-hmm.
You know, because I make more, I pay for more of this stuff for our son, and I take on a lot because I'm the mother, and that's what I do, right? But we still have a good relationship. We see each other every couple days. He's, you know, he knows Franklin or Noble. Sorry.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, they know each other. They interact. It's not contentious. So it wasn't that bad. But I do feel like an anomaly, right? I'm one of those corporate women that the manosphere is like, you know, bad. But I could walk away. I could get a divorce and walk away and not zero him out, not just take with what I had, and we'll go on with my life.
Well, you know, this is a really big point, which is that so you have spirit, right? I mean, you mentioned in the beginning you like the shit test, you're a bit of a brat, right? But the manosphere has this sort of idea that as a man, what you want is, you know, this hyper feminine, hyper submissive girl. And the thing is, you do want a woman who's going to, you know, surrender to you, and you do want a woman who knows how to be feminine. But because they think in these black and white binaries, they see that, okay, well, these certain women, she wants to work, she doesn't care about me, and therefore I want a woman who's only going to care about me and is not going to work, or is, you know, not going to do too much with that, not going to care about a job or a career. And it's like, okay, well, maybe that'll work. But the issue is that when you have a woman who's in that sort of lower level feminine resolution, especially in this modern context, when there's a lot of social pressure to kind of have it all, it creates, what I've noticed is that there's actually a lot of self-esteem issues that these women will have. And there's a sense of, like, the feminine, when it's in its lowest resolution, is almost completely undefined. And so a lot of women, it's interesting that you said in the beginning that you were trying to mold yourself to kind of to him. That's a super common thing that women will do. And men want it, but the issue is on this lower level, right? The woman doesn't know who she is. And so many of these red pill things that occur when, like, you know, the epiphany phase or something, it's not always, I don't always see that stuff as being some kind of, you know, malicious sort of action. And I think a lot of it has to do with when the guy himself isn't maybe necessarily growing. But not to get too sidetracked with it, the fundamental point here is that men who are more developed themselves tend to actually want women who know how to take care of themselves. And that is whenever I hear a guy who's like, they want this woman who is literally wants nothing else besides for him, and, you know, stay home with the kids and nothing else, there's nothing wrong with doing that. But I see these, like, this is a fantasy going on here, and what they really want is they want to have some kind of level of control. And but in practice, they're not attracted to a lot of those women, even if they see them, because they don't have a lot of energy to them very often. it's kind of like, well, I don't know, what do you want to do? Or they become super manipulative, right?
There's
And
a
they control the guy.
there's a couple of factors there, in my opinion, at least my experience. I think one, you've got guys that are insecure, and so if they have a woman who's, not just sit at home and don't have an opinion about anything or whatever, they're bothered by that because they don't want their own frame or whatever you call it to be challenged. And so that's just an insecurity. So a lot of younger men fall into that trap because they feel like it's too much work to have somebody that you're living with holding you accountable on a daily basis.
Mm-hmm.
And whereas I kind of like it. And I think the other thing is that you've got a lot of young men that, we have a society of generations, two or three generations now that have been raised by single moms and so forth, and they just want their mom around.
Yeah.
And so they want a woman that's like their mom, but also, so take care of me, do my laundry, cook my meals, clean my house, but don't question my authority because
Mm-hmm.
I don't know if I can tolerate that. And so I think it's a combination of factors,
And I do think that the women I know who went to college and then went and got a corporate job, many of them got married and then they're like, okay, I'm going to stay home and raise the kids. And then some of them go back or they support their husband's mission. And those relationships worked out really well. They did this stay-at-home mom thing very well. They ran the house. They organized everything. They were at the kids' school volunteering. And they did it really well, and they stayed mentally engaged.
What was a mission? You treat the child rearing and the stay-at-home thing as a mission,
yes,
and then it works out. But if you just treat it as a permanent vacation, then it's a problem.
Yeah.
So, and the ability to switch gears like you did throughout your career and so forth is important. But I mean, everybody should have that capacity. My career is nothing like what it was when it started out 30 years ago. Neither is yours. So it shouldn't be difficult to have different seasons in your life where you do different things. Now, from our perspective, we're both done having kids. We had our kids. They were already, at a certain age when we got together, and there was no expectation of, okay, you're going to stay home and I'm going to work or vice versa. It was, we're going to keep doing what we're doing. And, we want this for ourselves, and we want each other to be positive role models for our kids. But, there's no burden there because there's no expectation. Each of us has an ex that is, still a parent to our children, so it's not like either one of us is trying to fill this tremendous void. It's just, if anything, it's a +1 for the kids.
Right.
And that's where I see it is, okay, this is a value add. You guys, at least, to my kids, the way I see it is, hey, you guys get, this nice new role model. But, that's it. It's not anything more than that. So the way we have it set up may not work for everybody, because a lot of people that, would be coming to you for help and so forth are going to be people that are young and need, hey, how do I do this right, to start out? That's a totally different conversation. And, I can certainly give my opinion on those things, but I didn't do that right at that age, so I don't know if I'm the best person to give advice. With that said, I think I did pretty well with the midlife divorce and start over. So if somebody wants to ask me questions about that, I'm more than happy to help.
Well, yeah, I think that just so much of what happens with guys having this longer term problem with women is that the woman doesn't have an identity. And especially if the guy himself, like you were saying, Noble, isn't, kind of is a little bit of a mama's boy or doesn't really have himself together, and he can't create a good container for her to develop her identity, then as she develops, inevitably, it starts to experience all sorts of, she becomes more demanding on him as a way of trying to, well, I'm going to push on him and then see what kind of response I get back. Maybe I can find myself out from this or that. And this is when you end up having this sort of behavior that becomes very vindictive. I don't see almost ever women who are self-established being vindictive against guys in divorces. I don't. It. I'm not saying that, you know, they're necessarily as generous as a guy would be if you were to reverse the dynamics, but they're not vindictive. And it's not just a matter of, like, in your case, you were making more money. It doesn't even have to do with that. It seems like these women can be very, very good partners, but the issue is that a lot of them don't know how to balance that. Like if they become independent, which is a form of masculine integration, right? Developing an identity. They don't know then how to resurrender it to a guy. And so this to me is very, very interesting, because I think that, you know, this is really a way forward. You're trying a way forward. I don't trying to say we just need to get women down to this lower level of consciousness where they're no longer going to, but it's not going to work, and it's not desirable, because even the guys, as they get to this certain level of consciousness, they don't even want those girls either, because they're just kind of a drain. So
it's, you know, a friend of mine just went through a divorce, and we joke that she's like a couple years behind me, and she's a corporate woman. She's definitely 7 roles exceptional. Like, she does everything. I mean, she works out. Has 2 kids. She does everything. And she started dating someone, and he's like, I would have never guessed you would actually be submissive. Like, it was very difficult for him to understand. And her and I talk about it because I felt the same way. Like, I can be a boss at work. I mean, he has to shut my door because I'm like so loud sometimes. Like, I'm just, you know, I run my son's, everything that has to do with my son, the house, I run all of these things, and I make all of these decisions. So to be able to submit when he says, hey, we're going out on Saturday night, wear a dress. I'm like, okay, like, where are we going? It doesn't matter. Like, I don't, just tell me what to wear. Tell me where to be. I'll be there. I'll look pretty, and we're going to go have fun. Or, you know, it's nice to be able to not have to make those decisions, because I make decisions in so many other roles in my life, to be able to not have to worry about things. I don't have to worry about protecting the house. I don't have to, you know, there's so many things I don't have to worry about, and I can just say, yeah, he's got it covered. Tell me what to do. Okay, done. Like, it's, I don't have to worry about any of that. And she just went through the same thing, and she's another very successful, you know, holds herself to unrealistic expectations, just like I do. And she's like, oh, is it nice? I'm like, isn't it? Isn't it? But there's a lot of strong alpha men that I see them in the manosphere, and it, you know, don't date corporate women. I'm like, you know, we want to submit if you're strong, like, if you can handle it. Like, yeah, we're strong women. Okay.
Was this something, like, was what you just described right here, like having this awareness of, like, you're strong, and in this domain you want to be able to make decisions, you want to be able to assert yourself, but then in a relationship feeling not simply like wanting, but being able to, because I think that there's a difference between those two things. Like, a lot of women will say in theory, like, well, you know, I just want the guy to be, you know, like guys can't handle me, or they're not, but then there's a part of them themselves that actually can't let go and even create the space for him to lead. Like, if he tries to, then she kind of butts in. Was that something that you had to go through, or was it always just very natural for you to be able to? No.
have to establish the trust. She's not going to yield that control if she's used to having it. She's not going to. It takes time.
Yeah.
For a woman like that to learn to switch it off. Now she's gotten really good at it.
Mm.
The minute she walks out of that door in her office, she can switch it off. She's crawling in my lap and asking me to scratch her head. Like it's not difficult for her now, but that has to be established over time. You have to establish as the man in the relationship, like that you are trustworthy and capable, not only in the moment, like on a tactical level, but also on a strategic level. You have to be able to think ahead and plan ahead, and this is what we're going to do. You touched a little bit on the women who have to channel that masculine energy, right? And the women who work corporate jobs have to do that a lot. And I was talking to a friend of mine who's very good at this. He's one of these guys that had a bad relationship for decades and then figured it out. Like he got it back on track. And he said, and he doesn't know if it's testosterone or what it is, but that, both men and women are capable of having that aggressive masculine energy. But the woman is like, a car that's got a 4-cylinder engine in it trying to get up a hill. And the man has like a V12.
Mm-hmm.
By comparison. And he said the study he read that really opened his eyes to this is that a lot of people were complaining that there weren't enough women that were partners in big law firms. And why weren't these big law firms promoting more women? And what they discovered was that these law firms were actually hiring more women than men at the outset of their careers. But by the time they hit age 45, 50, when they're old enough to make partner, it was only the guys that were left.
Yeah.
And they started asking the women, like, why did you quit? You were on track. And it's like they just got tired.
Yeah.
Because that's a very high stress environment, aggressive environment. Like a law firm is one of those places where it's kill or get killed. And, yes, women are capable of it, but only over short distances. After a while, they just burn out. And so if you're in a case where, you have a corporate woman, and you don't want her to burn out, you better give her that release valve at the end of the day where, okay, I'm going to shut all this off. And, so I'm only 8 hours a day, having to run this engine, and then please, you take it over for the other 16 because I can't, whereas a guy can go 24 hours in that role and he should be able to. But if you're not doing that and you haven't established that she can trust you to do that, that's where you're going to have problems in the relationship.
Just as a little aside here, I love the analogy you made between men and women in that domain, and it also totally works if you flip it. So I have a young daughter. She's like 15, 16 months. And I have my business, obviously, which is good because it's flexible and I work weekends and evenings and usually early mornings too. But normally during the middle of the day, for at least, if my parents are around, they'll take her for about half the day. But so mornings I have her, like late morning I have her. And sometimes I have her, if they're not around, I have her late morning and afternoon. And okay, a few hours, that's okay. I can hang out with toddler, we have fun, play around the yard, go for a walk. But dealing with that for like extended period of time as a man, it's like I am just absolutely wiped. It's like I would give me a difficult problem to solve, give me than having to deal with the irrationality or the just doing, even having to go down to the level of sort of communicating with or interacting with a child.
Nurturing is not natural to you.
It's not natural. Yeah, it's not natural.
That's her job.
Yeah.
She can do it 24 hours a day, if she has to. Whereas, if you have to run and kill a wildebeest 24 hours a day, that's what you can do. I mean, that's it. That's how you wired. Right.
It's like I have to tap into the feminine, which is not an area that is natural, like, it's got limited reserves there. So
No, that's why when it comes to child rearing, so many guys, they say, my son is such a mama's boy, and I just, why can't I connect with them? And the first question I ask is, how old is he?
Yeah.
Because up until he's about 10 years old, that's totally normal.
Yeah.
Because he doesn't have that urge to seek out a male role model as much before. I mean, there's exceptions, and there's cases where your kids are going to like hanging out with dad because dad does wild and crazy cool shit. But, for the most part, it's totally normal for sons to be attached to their mother up until about the age of 10. It's after that point that you have to start presenting him with role models, not only yourself, but, little league coaches, scoutmasters, whatever you do, find ways to find masculine role models that will teach him the difference of, okay, mom loves you unconditionally, but the world doesn't treat you that way. The world treats men as performance-based.
Mm-hmm.
You have to perform and deliver as a man, to succeed in the world. Nobody's going to love you just because, you're a special snowflake. I mean, unfortunately, we have a lot of kids that are brought up by single moms that don't learn that, and so they want to be, everybody gets a trophy, but the reality is that that's the age that then, okay, boys need to go be boys, and they need their dads, and they need masculine role models. And so the nurturing part is not about that. When my dad was not nurturing, my dad was, get up at 3 a.m. because I'm going to have you in the duck blind before dawn, but that was an expectation. And then I started to learn, like, okay, this is pretty freaking cool. Like, guys get to do this stuff, but that doesn't really work. It didn't click for me. Like, my dad started me at like 6, and it didn't really stick until I got a little bit older. And then I realized, and maybe it's the balls drop, I don't know what it is, but at a certain point, when you get about 10 years old, is when you figure out that you want to spend more time with dad than mom.
Yep.
And so it's going to be the same as any parent. And I tell dads all the time when they're beating themselves up over this, like, why doesn't my kid want to play baseball with me? Well, he's 5. Let him go play trucks in the yard. It doesn't matter,
Yeah, I mean, in society, they used to use, it was around that time period. I think that the earliest was Sparta. They
Mm-hmm.
took 8, but usually it was in that 10 to 13 age range that they would pull. I mean, some societies had some pretty dramatic little rituals where you'd have this sort of metaphoric leaving the mother's house and going into the father's house,
Right.
and you go through like maybe a multi-weeks and month period of transition, and then you'd emerge. Yeah, rite of passage, and you'd emerge. Which, of course, we don't have any of that now, right?
No, we've lost
cat boys. We got cat boys instead, which I still don't really know what that is, and I think it's one of those things you don't want to look up.
That reminds me of furries. That is not an area that I need.
I think it's in that domain, to be honest. I think it's, but anyway, not getting that stuff.
I'm gonna remain blissfully ignorant there.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So what you mentioned, talking about this whole surrender thing, I think this is a really important topic to go more into. So you talk, Noble, about how you had to develop the trust. You had to convey that you were trustworthy. What was it? And I'd like to hear it from you and from you, and your perspective, Sarabeth. How did you do that? Because I think a lot of guys, even if they have the intention, like, of wanting to, like, they're good intentions, they want to lead, they want to be trusted, but they're doing things that still the woman doesn't feel like she can fully surrender to them, doesn't fully trust them nevertheless. So how did you act that created that trust?
Well, you have to deliver. You have to perform. Like I said, men are valued on their performance, and so it was any number of things. I mean, early in the relationship, something breaks around the house without being asked, I just would fix it. Little things like that. Or, okay, we have an open weekend where we don't have any kids. Hey, I've got a plan for this. And then it works out really well. We're on a trip we're taking a road trip to Las Vegas, and, we're sitting around in Williams, Arizona in a hotel. And she says, hey, I want to see the sunset tonight. And I'm like, okay, the Grand Canyon is 60 minutes away. We can make it before sunset. So here's your sunset. It's at the Grand Canyon. You're welcome.
Over delivered.
You kind of, I mean, when the opportunity presents itself, and if it's not like, no, there's a fine line between over delivering and like trying too hard.
Yeah.
I mean, if you're just, doing the pedestal thing, that's no good, because then she's just going to take that for granted. But if it's this is what's good for both of us, I think is what the key metric is there. So, the shower is leaking. Okay, you know what? I'm tired of it too, so I'm going to go fix that. Or, the deadbolt on the garage door doesn't match the other keys in the house, so I'm going to fix that. And there's no discussion about it. And when it's done, I don't say, hey, honey, look what I did. I don't ask for like an attaboy for it. It just gets done. When there's a crisis situation, you just handle it without freaking out and panicking. And the best thing you can do is try to role model it for your kids. I really like those opportunities. We had a situation. There's my daughter calling. I will let her know that we're listening. That like when the the garbage disposal broke, right. And I was in town. I was taking my son out on an outing, and she calls and says it's busted, blah blah blah. And okay, while I'm with him, I'm like, okay, on the way home, we're going to stop. We're going to pick one up. We're going to go home. We're going to replace it. It's done the same day. Like 2 hours later, new disposals under the sink, without any complaint, question, hesitation, just fixed. And
I think that the daily stuff is nice and consistent and very tangible. But some of the situations that come to mind that really made me understand the depth of his, I don't know if it's masculinity or ability or how much I trust him, was when you're seeing everything in the news and there's all like, there's riots or there's whatever, and there's these things going on, and I'm getting nervous and anxiety about it because I have a YouTube problem and a Twitter problem, right? And I just, all this stuff is coming into my feed, and I'm like, should I be worried? Like, so I come to him and I'm anxious, and I'm like, should I be worried about this? Should I be worried about that? No, we're going to do X, Y, and Z, and it'll be fine. Oh, okay. Like, automatically melt just, okay, he's thought of it. He knows what's going on. He's going to tell me when to be worried. And that trust, I mean, don't get us wrong. Like in the beginning, we had some hard conversations. I had some bad habits from my previous relationship of girls' nights out and with the way to act and showing respect to him in certain ways. We had some really hard conversations. I mean, and he was very clear about what his expectations were. And if I did not like that, then we're going to have a problem. And that was some introspective I had to do of what do I want out of this relationship, and what is the kind of woman that I want to be, which is part of how the roles kind of came, that evolved and helped me understand the kind of woman I wanted to be in this relationship. But we had some, I mean, he laid the law down a couple times, and I had to think about how I was going to react and how to move forward. So we certainly had those moments.
But because he had been showing up, it was almost as if it gave you the container to trust enough to even change some of those habits.
Exactly. But he had boundaries, right? He had these are my expectations, and It was very clear. And he's like, I expect this of you, and in return, you get this from me. It wasn't just one way. It wasn't, you didn't give me a list of things that he expected out of me. It was, I expect this of you, and this you get this from me. So it was very equal.
Said, I know guys that have done that and made a list, especially in relationships that are broken. And it's been very helpful for them to, because conversationally, people don't always maintain their composure.
Yeah.
And you get a lot of shouting matches and people get their feelings hurt and so forth. And, I don't have feelings, so it doesn't happen to me. But so I recommend, okay, write it down, write down. And again, this friend of mine that I'm referring to that, fixed his 25-year marriage doing this. This is what he did. He said, look, this is our contract, and if you're good with it, great. And if not, we might need to be talking to the attorney, but he wrote down, like, okay, this is what I expect of you, and this is what you can hold me accountable to, and they negotiated on it a little bit here and there, on what her interpretation of it was and so forth. But in the end, it made the expectation clear. I think the only time that we got into, an argumentative mode over it was when the expectation was not clear ahead of time.
Yeah.
Like, okay, she did something and I said, hey, I don't expect this. I expect this. And you did that. And, I'll own my piece of it because maybe I didn't make that very clear. But going forward, this cannot happen like this again, because I'm now letting you know this is the expectation for behavior. And again, it works both ways. There are certain things that I do that she doesn't like, that she says, okay, well, let's not do this anymore. I'm like, okay, fine, that's not a hill I got to die on. So,
Yeah.
So
Now, was this something that you feel like you always mostly had, or did you grow into over the years that sort of, high level of conscientiousness and reliability?
I think it's a combination of things. In my case, a lot of the men that I talked to that had these difficulties, they struggled because they didn't have good dads in their lives. And I can't relate to that because my dad is a man's man, and he was an exceptional role model for me. Where I went sideways is, like most kids in their late teens and 20s, I was very rebellious. But rebelling against the lessons that my father gave me wasn't the right course of action. And so I had to learn some things some hard ways. So for me, it was a combination of evolution and learning from my own mistakes, but also sort of returning to form. And okay, I'm going to start asking myself, what would the old man do? And then go from there, and make that my baseline going forward, because I realized that, okay, this is a man who was able to successfully raise 6 children, put them all through college, married to the same woman and only one woman for, 50 years now and all that stuff. Like, he's kind of figured it out, and there's no excuses there either, because his own father was not a good dad, in spite of that. So it's totally possible and completely within the grasp of any man who puts his mind to it. But you do need to seek out, counsel and role models where it's available if you don't quite know the course.
So you have a framework, Sarabeth, that you use to describe this compartmentalization, this switch that goes on and off in different domains. So can you break down these 7 roles for us? What are the 7 roles?
Sure. I'll probably forget one. And that's part of the point, is that I always felt like I was forgetting something. And so I was like, I got to write them all down, because I need to, I reflect on them every week.
You should have made a sticky note for you.
I know, I should have brought my little card. So Queen, which is the household, making your house a home. The matriarch, being the mother and rearing your children and making sure they have everything they need to be successful. Corporate leader, which I think is something that not all women need to have. It comes in and out of season. You've got your athlete role, because we all need to look good naked. And that's just, and it's not just about, it's about your health, physically, mentally, all of, your diet, all of that stuff, keeping yourself healthy. You've got Angel, which is something I don't feel like I do enough of, is doing acts of kindness for others, whether that's strangers or reaching out to friends, or being very authentic about it and not placating. But just, you have to feed your friendships. And some of that is also where some people put like spiritual and they're religious. You've got entrepreneur role, which is that kind of active mind, like those multiple streams of income. Where can I take my skill and make money off of it? That's what I wish I would have done in my 20s, is build that side business so that I could stay at home with my kids after being a corporate later, and that would have been perfect, but I digress. And then the last one, which is, kind of a difficult one for a lot of women to be very open and honest about, is goddess. And that's the bedroom. Like, that's the, keeping it spicy. You can't, if you're doing all these roles, you're going to be tired. And you can't allow that to go on too long. So the roles are like a framework to think about things. And every week you should look at them and say, okay, I did something in each one of these. I finished something. I made progress in each one of these roles. And if you're not making progress and you didn't do anything that week, it's like, okay, well, I'm going to try better next week, but focus on what you did complete. And if you find like, oh, I didn't have sex with my husband this week, like, that's a problem. Like, you can't, and this goddess is, if it's wrong in the bedroom, there's something wrong with the relationship. Like, you should be able to have that open communication and that trust to be naked in front of each other with the lights on, and be able to talk about your fantasies and, all those things. It can't happen unless the rest of the relationship is good.
Do you feel like the sexual piece is the piece that is the biggest reflection of a healthy relationship? Because I would say that it's either it is a reflection of the health of the rest of the relationship, or it's a reflection of the lack of health in the rest of the relationship. A good sex life is very on the extreme. It's either a really messed up relationship and the sex is wild, or it's a really good relationship and the sex is wild. It's not usually.
I have to agree with you, and it has to do with the communication. I talk to women who say, well, my husband had a porn addiction, he had to stop that. I'm like, in my head, I'm thinking, well, what was he watching? Like, what is he like? Like, what is he getting from that he's not getting from you? Like, if your husband comes to you and says, I want to try X, and you're like, ew, well, they're never going to talk to you again. And things that happen in our bedroom and the things we say to each other wouldn't happen out, just because he treats you one way in the bedroom. If you're submissive and you guys have this crazy sex life, doesn't mean he's going to treat you like that out there. No one disrespects the queen, right? Like, it's just, you have to have that balance of, when you're here, it's different than when you're out there in public. So it's a lot of the trust, the communication, but I do think it's a sign of a good relationship. Did I say too much?
No, I was just trying to keep my mouth shut.
So here's a question. It's a very common trope that as women get older and as they develop, I think because they develop their independence, right? They develop their identity, that they tend to become more sexual, and that they tend to, there's more of like, that opens up more. Now, my question is, how much of that is just a lot of as you yourself develop and you get more complete, that you feel like you can open up more in that domain, like maybe to be a little bit more precise, how much of women who shut down their sexuality, because I think a lot of guys take it personally when a woman doesn't doesn't want to do certain things. It's like, oh well, she did it for this guy in college, or she did it. But I think a lot of it is that it's not even that the guy himself isn't necessarily desirable. There might be some level of a trust thing going on, but that she herself has a bad relationship with her sexuality and some of the more wild parts of herself. Is that something that you can relate to, or that you've seen with women, and that a lot of it's like self-acceptance to be able to be sexually open?
I would say in my 20s, I had some things that I wanted to explore, kind of crazy stuff. And when I met my previous marriage, it was totally not something that he was even remotely. So I buried it all. I just like buried it, whatever. I've always been a pretty close to my sexuality, like just a sexual person, just pretty comfortable. But I buried a lot of it just because of the relationship I was in, and I mirrored what was normal or what was expected. But when I met Noble, and we had that the connection and just the openness and the being able to have a conversation about anything in this area, it was just like we talked about it all. And it wasn't like I rediscovered, but I had an environment that I was able to let it all out. I don't know, but some of the women that I've talked to, all of them are pretty healthy in that area. I don't really have many friends that are, just not interested. But our hormones do play a part. I mean, over 40. I mean, just it gets out of control.
I think you hit it on the head with the self-esteem issues, and that goes both ways. The struggle that people have is, and it can, when she says, well, the guy will approach the woman and say, hey, I saw this in this dirty movie that I just accidentally watched, and I don't know, maybe we could try it. If the girl goes, ew, then he feels bad, and he doesn't want to ever talk about it again. But it goes both ways. She had the same experience on her end. Hey, I want to try this, whatever freaky thing is that she's talking about that we'll have a conversation about later. And so, but if the guy is like, if he's not like, mentally stable and strong enough to be open-minded about it, and he's just going to be like, that happens a lot too. There are plenty of men out there that, they're not ready for it.
And the esteem grows. Like if we try something new, or if I do something, he's complimentary, like,
But yeah, you have to learn to build that up.
Yeah.
You don't go right into the, 9th degree black belt, freak show. You start out.
We're not at 9. We're not there.
I didn't say that.
Okay.
I said you don't start there.
Okay.
But we'll define that later.
Okay.
I'll draw you a picture, and then you can tell me if you're ready to test for 9th degree black belt.
Okay.
But the reality is that both the man and the woman are rarely completely at the same level for that. Now, again, this is where we have the benefit of age and experience, and we have a little more confidence with ourselves, especially at the point where we met. Now, there were some differences to align with, but most of it was just, again, getting back to trust. Okay, can I trust you to say, hey, I want to try this? And I know this is going to sound a little bit crazy, but, but having the openness to say, yeah, okay, we can try that once and see how it goes, it is all there is to it. And most people don't reach that level of it right away. They have to kind of work on that. But it also helps to be in good shape. You look at it, okay, well, here's a picture of this thing that I want to try, and the first thing the woman's going to say is, well, yeah, but she's tiny and blah blah blah, and okay, well then get tiny. I don't know what to tell you. You'll have a much easier time with it. Is what I'm saying. Is if you break that barrier first, then the rest of it's real easy. But most people don't want to do that much work, and that's the real problem.
And she should be your favorite porn star, right? I mean,
sure.
he gives me confidence and compliments me in all the right places, and he gives me a lot of confidence with what he does and says, and that makes a huge difference.
Well, it's a reinforcing behavior, right? Like you don't ever want to give your partner an empty compliment. What you want to do is you want to reward good behavior. It's like a dog.
Yeah.
You do something and then here's your treat. And so I'm not saying you're like a dog.
Okay.
Even though you like it when I smack your hair like a dog. So but it's the same concept. It's Pavlovian almost. You have to learn, like, and most guys are dumb about this. Like, hey, I really liked it when you did that. Well, fucking tell her that you really liked it when she did that. Whatever that is, let her know more than once. Like when it happens, and then the next day, hey, by the way, last night that thing you did with that was, like, let her know that you're thinking about it and that it was that good. And then that will reinforce the behavior. And it will also reinforce the notion that, hey, I can try crazy new stuff and he might really like it. And then, he'll buy me a bag of Skittles or something, And I mean, it's just, you like Skittles?
I do like Skittles.
Okay. So, but that's all there is to it. But that's a process. You don't start out of the gate like that. You work your way up to it. And I think what a lot of people miss too is that, in the, instant gratification culture is that they don't play the long game, and if it's somebody that you're going to commit to, well, you have the rest of your life.
Mm-hmm.
So figure that out, accept that, and work on that timetable. Yeah, you can act in the now and you can say, well, we're going to live with urgency because life can end at any moment, but also whatever the length of your life is, you have the rest of it with this person, and operate on that timetable.
Mm-hmm. In a given week, do you guys, like, is foreplay kind of like a continuing thing that you guys do throughout the day, most days, to keep things amped up, until you guys see each other again?
Yeah, I think that's important. One of the nice things about, we both work from home. Mm-hmm. So, we're constantly able to make eye contact. We're constantly able to make physical contact.
He harasses me in the workplace.
If she called HR, like, sexual harassment all over the place. But a woman is not a sex doll that you just turn on and off. Like, you have to kind of build it up a little bit. I mean, as much as you would like for her to be ready to go at any given moment, the reality is, unless she's ovulating, that's not happening.
Yeah.
She's going to need a little warm up. She's going to need a little bit of prep. And the way you do that is throughout the day. And there are a million ways to do this, But
it's easy because we're both at home.
It is, but even if you're not at home, there's a million ways to do it. You can send her a text message saying, hey, I'm thinking about you and that polka dot piece of lingerie we have, or whatever.
I don't have polka dot lingerie.
Well, maybe you should. But the point is that, these little hints and reminders, go a long way. And we have so many ways to do that these days. There's no excuse for it, but absolutely, you got to keep the fire burning, at least at a slow, smoldering burn throughout the day, if you want it to be, smoking hot in the evening.
Yeah. Now, I would imagine that, there's a 7 roles thing for a guy as well, the corollary to that. Do you think about it in that framework? How do you go about, like, because I feel like there's a lot of the issues that guys have, like when you're describing there's this issue, you go and deal with it. You go, there's this other issue, you go deal with it. You make sure that you have everything planned out for the weekend. for so many younger guys, it's just such a completely foreign concept at this point. I mean, it's so I feel like so many guys get overwhelmed by even really really small stuff. So where would you tell those guys to start, because they may have a bit of an uphill battle?
And some of the ideas that he gets of what he wants to do is just by listening to things that I've said.
Mm-hmm.
Like early on, I mean, I love sunsets, so I mean that's easy. It's pretty cheap. Or activities, walking around a park. Like he just listens to the things that I like and be like, oh, let's go do this. Okay. Like most of the women I know, when their man plans any date, it doesn't matter what it is, they're like, awesome. Like they planned the date. Like I didn't have to. It could be anything. So I would just say start with something, stalk their social media, look at their Pinterest board. Like women love Pinterest. Like they pin everything. Like just see what they're pinning and then go, oh, look, they pin this. Okay, yeah, we can go do that. I mean, he's very good at it. He's very good at figuring out activities for us to do and picking up on little things and saying, okay, we're going to go do X. I don't know if you like that.
I'm not sure that was the question.
That wasn't the question.
But it was good.
It's good. It's good. I think what he's asking is there an equivalent to the 7 roles, some kind of framework for men to do the same thing? And
we've talked about it.
We have. And I think so. One of the things that I did while I was in the year of like separation, figuring out, what I was going to do after my divorce was final and all that. And I had a lot of alone time. Did a lot of reading, did a lot of writing, journal writing, introspective type stuff, kind of figuring out who I was, what was important to me, what my values were, and what were my priorities going to be. Now, these things can change over time. Like she talks about, like you have seasons for these things. I think that's relevant to anybody, man or woman. And I think it's also important for a man to discover that for himself and then reevaluate it on a periodic basis, whether it's, once a year, once every 5 years, whatever. But I sat down and figured out, okay, these are the values and kind of roles that I want to embrace, as a man, as a father, I made a list. I don't have it in front of me, but I can get it to you. But basically, the idea is, okay, these are the things that I think are important, and these are the things that I want to be. And I think the difference is we don't always get to shut them off. Mm-hmm. So sometimes you have to, if you're going to be, if you're going to be a dad, for example, you don't get to just stop being a dad. Like, okay, I'm a leader at work, but if I get a call that my kid's got a broken elbow, I have to go deal with that. That doesn't just get shut off. Or, I'm going to be, a guardian over my household. Well, that's a 24/7 thing. That doesn't stop. Mm-hmm. And so you have to look at all these things that you're doing, all these roles that you're going to fill, and you have to look at them synchronously. Like, okay, I have to do all this at once. And it's difficult, but you have to do it. And I'm not giving you a number. I don't know how many of these things there are. They can be one thing or they can be 10 things. That's why I say, like, young people tend to focus on 1 or 2. And I think maybe that's because the brain is just not developed enough to add that many layers. I don't know, but get really good at those things, whatever you've decided they are, before you add more, because that's where you get tripped up, is when you try to take on too much all at once. So when a young man comes along and says, okay, I'm doing all this, and, I'm thinking about adopting a dog. And I'm like, Okay. Have you got everything else in your life really squared away? Because you're adding another piece of responsibility there.
Mm-hmm.
And that's just an example, but like, I want to add this to my life. Okay, are you ready to add that to your life? Or are you just trying to fill a void that maybe is not really there? You're just avoiding something else that you need to be doing.
Yeah.
Because that's usually the case, is that there's a more difficult thing out there, and you'd rather go do the distraction than do the hard work.
Right.
And so that's the advice that I would give is, I don't know that there's any one book that you can read that says, okay, this is how to be a man, like this is your Boy Scout handbook for this thing. I think you have to decide that for yourself, find good mentors, and don't be afraid to call them that and ask them for help. I have mentors even at my age, and I talk to them all the time, but it's important to be able to check yourself, kind of a sanity check against people that you trust and respect and know that are wise, because it also helps that they have distance
Mm-hmm.
from your situation, and they can give you advice that, because they're not in the fog of war like you are with whatever situation you're in, and that helps tremendously. And you should get that from your spouse as well. I mean, she can be, a tremendous asset in that. But the reality is, when it comes to, defining yourself as a man, I would say that looking for somebody to give you that definition is sort of antithetical to being a man, in my opinion.
Yeah. And, I think one of the things that a lot of the guys, aside from just not having good role models growing up, but even in the manosphere, they talk about this because at the end of the day, what you're doing, okay, when there's some problem and you just go and fix it and you deal with it, when you're there, you plan something for the two of you, so it's a good experience. That is you performing, but we tend to call it the burden of performance, but it's not a burden, it's a privilege.
Exactly.
And when guys look at it like a burden, it's like they're always trying to find a way they can get out of it. How do I get away from the burden? They're not looking now. Maybe they missed this. I don't have to do it. And that's where the problems start, because women see a lot more than I think guys even realize.
Yep.
And so they'll cut corners, and they'll talk, and they'll try to have all sorts of excuses for it. And over time, that diminishes the trust, which affects, and they're like, well, why won't you give me the sex?
Right.
But even if she can't elucidate it, that's in the back of her mind. I can't trust this guy with
Right.
this basic stuff. How can I trust him with my most guarded secrets and fantasies?
For sure. No, you have to have her complete confidence, before it's like the Maslow's hierarchy of needs. All of those things need to be satisfied for the woman as well. Like, she has to have basic protection. She's got to have, the comfort and so forth. Like, I mean, you can almost follow that exactly as a map to, okay, here's what, when you're close enough to satisfying all of that in your own home, not just for her, but for yourself as well, then she's going to be a lot closer to being at a comfort level where, you can do the freaky stuff or whatever, or you can just be comfortable doing, hey, it doesn't even have to be sexual in nature. It can be, hey, I've got a surprise for you, next Thursday night, wear this dress and just be ready to go out. A lot of women will be like, no, you got to tell me what we're doing, because I don't trust you to give me an outfit and take me out of the house.
Yeah.
It's that level of confidence that she's going to have, and it's because you've satisfied all those other needs in her own mind. Whether, like you said, she can elucidate it or not, she knows it's there. It's a subconscious imperative.
Yeah, it's very interesting, because a lot of guys will look at it for the big thing, and they'll say, okay, maybe they did actually plan out some event, but it's they didn't do stuff prior to set the foundation of the relationship right, so that she's going to act in this kind of, fantasy way for him. And I think it's also the reason why a lot of guys get very frustrated with long-term relationships and say, oh, they don't work, they're not going to work. Your people like your dad, Noble, would differ on that. 50 years to the same woman, it's not the fact that they were in a committed relationship that was the problem for these guys. The problem is the fact that in a committed relationship, the privileges of performance become very acute across the board. And it's easier to, if you just go out and date another woman, you don't have to actually establish genuine trust. You can create the illusion of trust. And you can get all of those same benefits for limited time only.
Right. No, you have the the honeymoon period that they call it, where everything seems cool, until you realize, 5 years in, and you're like, I don't know why she won't trust me to plan this trip to Cancun. Well, bro, you can't even get the garbage out on time.
Yeah.
Like you have to build that up.
And I've never had a honey-do list. Like I've never had to write down like, hey, these are all the things you need to do. Now I've done that in past relationships, and I don't have to do that.
Mm-hmm.
It's really, we are a partnership. This is our home. These are the things he does. This is the things I do. We have our systems, and it just works. There is no check it off the list. Then you're becoming the mom.
Yes. Yeah.
You don't ever want that. I mean, when she's going to have her roles, she's going to have her time when she's got to be a mother. She's going to have her time when she's got to be the boss at work and so forth. That's not the woman I want to bang. I'm not trying to bang my mom.
Mm-hmm.
So don't act like my mom when you're not being a mom. When it's just you and me, I don't act like some hot college girl. You know what I mean? Like, I want you to be playful and youthful and fun, because that's what guys like in women. The problem is most guys don't create the space for them to do that. I can't be playful and youthful and fun because, I've got to take care of X, Y, and Z around the house that hasn't been done, And even if it's something that she should do, fine, create the space for it. Make room for all these things. Be the field general of your own home and handle it. But don't, it doesn't mean like that you have to do everything. You have to wait hand and foot on her. That's absolutely not the case. But you got to give her space for these things.
Mm-hmm.
You have to look at it and say, okay, she needs, 2 hours this evening to fill out enrollment paperwork for her son's school next year. All right, so I'm just going to leave her the fuck alone.
Yeah.
And let her go do that. And then, we'll do whatever. We'll go to dinner or whatever we're going to do. Like but you have to be aware of that. And you have to be, somewhat observant of what's going on in this person's life. I mean, they are living with you. You should be paying attention to these little things, but it's incredible how many guys don't.
Mm-hmm.
Make these jokes about how, guys don't know the name of their kids' school teachers. Okay, well, I don't know the name of my kids' school teachers, but I know that they go to school. Like I know where they go to school. I know what they're doing. I get reports in the email on their grades and stuff. Like there's levels to this.
Mm-hmm.
And you don't have to necessarily be the helicopter parent or the helicopter spouse and have control freak levels of everything. But you need to be aware that's going on, because that's what frustrates them more than anything. And I see it every day, because she'll have stuff with her son that I know her ex-husband has been on the email for, because I get the same emails and I'm aware of it. Yeah, I know that this is, Isaac's last day of school or whatever, or this is his half day or whatever, and her ex will still have to ask, like, what time is he getting picked up?
Mm-hmm.
Like, bro, come on. I know that, like, it's just, so pay attention to your surroundings, like have your head on a swivel. This isn't just like look out for danger. This is just look out for everything that's going on.
Mm-hmm. It sounds like when it comes down to it, so much of this is being present.
Yep.
And, you know, a lot of guys, especially with the increase in technology, are really off in their heads. And they have a hard time grounding and paying attention to really what's around them and being able to deal with what's around them. And I would imagine, I mean, that's part of the trust thing as well. Because if you're not present, then how can she trust you? She doesn't feel like she can trust you to deal with something that happens around you.
Right.
She's not paying attention, you know?
Yeah, it's all the typical behaviors. You know, you'll drive down the road and you'll see people staring at their cell phone while they're doing 60 miles an hour.
Mm-hmm.
You know, things like that. And I just, you know, I scratch my head over things like that. Like you drive into a parking lot and some guy's crossing the road, staring at his cell phone, you know. You get hit by a car, bro. Like, what are you doing? But distractions are numerous, and I think that's by design. You know, I mean, not to get too political, but I think, you know, we've wired our society to make everybody kind of stupid and unaware, and you know, it's our job to be better than that. You know, not behave that way. You know, like I like driving, so I don't get distracted by my phone.
Yeah.
It's fun to me, but you know, I guess not everybody feels that way. So
What's the single, I mean, maybe you're pretty grounded in general, but is there like a single activity that really, really brings you into the present moment more than anything else? Like it's kind of like your zen.
what's yours?
What's mine?
Yeah. I know what mine is, but this is like when we go to the restaurant. I know what to order and you need 10 minutes. So should I go first?
Cigars.
Cigars. No, I would say I like to at least once a week, you know, on the weekend, a Sunday or something like that, I'll sit down outside at our little patio table and smoke a cigar and write in my journal. And that's when I can kind of wrap my head around things. I don't just do it once a week though. Like I have times where I just have to take a break, and I find writing in my journal helps a lot. Um, as far as being able to articulate whatever crap is in my head, putting it on a page, and as I write it out, it starts to make a little more sense to me. It starts to become more cohesive. I can see the structure form as the sentence forms, and then I feel a little better about it, you know, as far as that goes. So that's always been my go-to. You know, I like cigars and whiskey and stimulating conversation as much as the next guy, but ultimately, a man's got to be comfortable in his own head.
Yeah.
And that's where I reached that point.
Yeah. It's a lot of the drive to distraction is that people don't want to be alone with their own thoughts. It's kind of like what am I supposed to do? I have to do something. What am I going to do? What am I going to do? What am I going to do? It's like a neurosis kind of thing.
Right.
That comes out there.
Yeah, and I think you're missing a great opportunity when you surrender those moments of silence to the dopamine, the cheap dopamine hits of social media.
Yeah.
You have an opportunity to really look at things from a longer view, and instead you've given it away for nothing. And that's what I try to discipline myself to avoid is, you know, when I feel like the head's getting crowded, put the phone down. You know, even reading a book is a better option in my case. You know, I like reading old history books though, so those always give me the perspective and the long view of, you know, like, okay, what's going on today has happened before. You don't need to panic about it because here's how it usually works out, that kind of thing. So.
And the good thing about reading a book that's like high quality, like I don't like nonfiction for sure, but even like serious novels, is that you're maybe like you're interested in what you're reading, but there's a sort of saturation point in your head where you're like, yeah, like I don't need to read anymore right now. I've noticed that and I actually think it's a compliment to the authors in its own sense, but with certain kinds of novels, like really, really engaging stories, it affects my mind almost as much as like if I were playing some really addicting video game. Like I won't be able, you won't sleep. I remember just when I was younger, there's one time when I was like ninth grade, I was reading this fantasy series. They just made a crap version of it, of course, on Amazon, The Wheel of Time.
Yeah.
And they're like 1,000-page books, and I would read one a day. And which, if you do the math on that, I mean, I was basically not doing like one every day or two or something like that. I was basically not doing anything besides like I'd go downstairs, get food, bring it up to eat while I was reading. I'd sleep for less than 5 hours. And I remember after like almost a week, my mom was like, I'm taking you out of the house. You have to. And I remember going to the supermarket, and I was like, the lights and everything. Like I was like, I was not even, it's one of those things. Like it was a similar experience when I was in corporate America, and you work like 80, 90-hour a week, and you're dreaming the work. So it's like you're never actually escaping from it. You're just constantly like, anyway. I always I just say that anecdote because whenever I want to talk about how like, yeah, book's a healthier option, I'm like, but not that serious. That wasn't.
I read a few of those books, so I know what you're talking about. But I got to the point where, and I was probably about the same age when I read them, but I found it to get a little repetitive after a while. I think an author, because I've written novels, and I think the biggest thing that the biggest challenge an author has is ending the story.
Yeah.
Just letting it be, and you don't always have to continue. You can just stop. You can say, okay, I've made my point with this and it's done. And maybe I'll come back to it in a few years, maybe I won't. But
Robert Jordan died. That's how he ended.
Yeah, exactly.
He just died. That's how he
didn't see it finished. I think he has somebody else. There's somebody else that finished the books.
Yeah, he got ghostwritten.
And so, which is, I mean, I'm not going to knock it. He's a commercially hugely successful author.
Yeah.
No, I do like, I read both fiction and nonfiction. I'm reading some of the old Ian Fleming, James Bond novels now. Those are good. Big fan of Hemingway, but both Ian Fleming and Hemingway have a similar style of prose that I like, which is it's not too much. Unlike Robert Jordan, who will spend 20 pages describing what a room looks like, Ian Fleming and Ernest Hemingway just get right to the point. And there's rarely a chapter where there's no action. And so I try to model my own writing after that, is that, okay, let's just chop, chop, chop. Let the reader imagine it however he wants. Give him enough to start with and then go. So that's my preference, because then you do get sucked into this vortex of, I'm in this other world. And then when I shut it off and re-enter the real world, it's like it's really hard to adjust your eyesight again, because you've changed your reality for so long. And people experience that all the time, and I think they seem to kind of like it. They like to binge watch Netflix shows in a single weekend, or they'll have a movie marathon where they watch all 30,000 Marvel movies at once, or I'm guilty of that. I'll watch all 3 extended version Lord of the Rings films at once, and then you walk out and you're like, man, why are there no orcs out here? And it's just you do have to be very careful about how much you disengage. I went through a phase in my 30s where I spent a lot of time playing World of Warcraft, and that will fuck you up. Don't do that. So I always tell kids that are into video games, like, all right, you got to time box that, because you spend too much time on it, and then you start thinking like the rewards that you're getting there are real, and they're not. There's real life rewards out there to go get those. Make that your daily quest, not the virtual crap.
Yeah, I never played those kind of games just because once I realized what they were doing, that it was open ended. Like, because I knew myself from the games that I had like side quests. I'd always do everything. I'm like, if they're creating a world where it never stops, then yeah, I got to stay away from this, because
it's meant to be addictive. So
Yeah. Well, guys, this has been a real pleasure. Do you have any last kind of closing thoughts, anything that you really want to impart to the audience? Because I mean, you guys have such a model relationship. What can you give people so that they can have this kind of passionate, high trust, connected relationship that you guys have?
You want to go first?
Sure, I'll go.
You go.
Focus on the intent and on what your spouse is saying to you. So if they love you, and whatever they're saying to you is most likely coming from a place of love, and they want the best for you, they're not saying something to necessarily degrade you or bring you down. There's obviously exceptions, but anything he says to me that automatically I might start to get defensive, I think, well, no, he's this is, I trust him. This is coming from a place of love. I need to think about the intent before reacting. So
I would say just be authentic and be accountable to yourself first. Anytime there's a problem, the first question you need to ask yourself is, what did I do to make this happen? Because then when you're going to address it in a constructive, confrontational manner, you're going to say, look, this went sideways. Now here's what I did wrong, but here's also where I think you could have done some things differently. And that will make it much more productive if she understands that you're taking ownership of it and you're doing your part to improve as well. Then it's going to come across much more sincere and much less like, she's the only one that has to fix anything in the relationship. So always look for the opportunity to improve yourself first, but also always be authentic, and don't be afraid to be authentic, because that's where being inauthentic over a period of time will just make you resentful. And then, when you try to change direction, it's going to come across like, well, I don't understand. You were like this for 10 years. Yeah, but I wasn't being authentic. Well, that's your fault, so do that first.
And that's leadership right there. And
Yeah.
taking that ownership and be authentic and to take accountability. I mean, that sets the tone for everybody.
Yep.
agreed.
Well, thank you guys so much. I really appreciate this.
Sure.
And we'll be in touch. We'll be in touch.
For sure. It's great talking.